Welcome back to Awaiting Arrows. I haven't done sort of like a chat video in a while, but I wanted to share something that I'd been thinking about this weekend, and it was one of those things that's really helping me and really profound. It's not just something to sort of pat me on the back or pat others on the back that are waiting for children and just sort of tie us over. It's not an empty platitude. It's actual real hope, rooted in the reality of God. And so I wanted to share that. One of the things about waiting for children or waiting to have children, one of the things that makes it so bittersweet, so beautiful, but also so difficult is that you're not just waiting to have a child. Like you can go, okay, I've had a child, I can check that box. A child is a human being. It's a living being, and it's a unique person. So even though, it has your genetics and your family's genetics and your spouse's genetics, and all that is so amazing and beautiful, it's not the end all. Like the birth is not the end. It's the beginning of the child's life. And I mean, the conception is the beginning of the child's life. And so from there, it's a lifetime of experiences that you have with this child as you continue to, grow them up to be an adult and shape their development in so many ways. And so waiting for a child is like waiting on a million little dreams to be realized. And especially if you have, maybe you haven't thought about it that way, but sometimes, if you have a really rich background, or if you just really, I still get scared about it sometimes because it's a weighty undertaking, but I've experienced so much richness with the Lord and so many amazing things from my family and from church and friends and life. And I mean, my life is not just perfect and skating by with no problems, but I've experienced so much richness in my life and I've learned so much, and I'm dying to pour it out on somebody. And it's not just the lessons I've learned from God, but just the experiences of life that I want to give away. And, when you're a parent, maybe you haven't thought about this yet, but when you're a parent, you get to give away what was given to you. And there's something so beautiful about that your parents laid down their lives to, put into you and help you experience those things. And now you get to give that away with all of your experience to your children. And my parents did a great job. They really leaned into, wow, I get to help my kids experience something, and then I get to experience it all over again through their eyes. And so over time, I've been collecting, like whenever I have a thought about, oh, I really want to share that with a kid, I scribble it down on a piece of paper and put the piece of paper into this mug that I have. I got the idea actually from the blessing jar that I grew up with. When I was growing up, my family had a blessing jar on the counter, and whenever God would do something really cool, provision and answer to prayer, we'd write it down and put it in the jar so that we could remember and take those out to just remember as a family. And so I figured I could do the same thing with my longings and prayers, and it's a way to sort of honor those desires, but I also pull them out and pray about them specifically. And some of these are things like, I want to ask my kids to repeat Bible stories. I've read them. Like I've heard of women doing that, where they ask their kids to repeat stories so that they can see, what was absorbed and how the kids are processing that. And sometimes they come up with some pretty profound things. I want to see them play with all their cousins. I want to see them get together and play with little friends. I want to make our kids' dreams come true with great gifts and fun trips. I remember how excited my parents were to finally take us somewhere, or finally give us that toy that we'd been dreaming about for many years, and finally be able to give it to us at Christmas. Kids' dreams seem very small, but it's so fun to be able to make those come true. I want to count down fun things on the calendar and wait at the window with them, waiting for guests. My brother and I used to sit at the window and wait for our grandparents to arrive, and we would count things down like Christmas on the calendar. I want to experience the anticipation of those things all over again with my kids. And it's not entirely selfish. It's not entirely just me wanting to experience those things all over again, but I want to give them away. Christmas is very difficult now because there's an element of, I've experienced a lot of it, and I still love the beauty of the gospel and the beauty of the season, but I want to give it away to my kids. I'm kind of, there's only so much that I can buy for myself as far as presents. I want to give the season away to my kids. I want to bring great joy to our families through our kids. I want to see the joy that I see it in my mother-in-law with her grandchildren from the other kids. I want to see the joy that is brought to grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and even friends from the children. It's just another level of joy that is experienced by the whole family. It's sort of like children cause life to begin again for everybody. They give everybody fresh goals and fresh joy and fresh things to think about. And again, that's not the only reason you have children, but those are just some of the things that I've been yearning after. So I've been doing that for quite some time, but recently over the weekend, I was talking to God about a bunch of things, and he made it clear to me that he said, these conversations are sacred. And trusting me does not mean that you stop yearning for things that you don't have. Trust in me doesn't mean you turn off your feelings. It means that you allow the conversation to be between us alone. And you don't allow the enemy and his fear tactics to talk over the Lord and the Holy Spirit. So this is a sacred conversation. When I take these little dreams out and I give them to God, that conversation needs to stay between us. So I felt him saying very clearly this weekend, guard the conversation. Even if you feel pain, don't allow the enemy to take your hand and draw you into a conversation that leaves you distrusting God's goodness and doubting him. Even if you're full of doubt and fear, you still don't have to have the conversation with the flesh. Have the conversation with the Lord. Guard the conversation by processing it with the Lord and being open and honest with him about your feelings, but then letting him speak to you, giving him your dreams and letting him speak over those, giving him your doubts and fears and letting him speak over those. Be very careful. Guard the conversation. A lot of times I hear people say, and they mean well, but I hear people say, oh, God is okay with your doubts and your questions, and he's okay if you have to scream. And yes, all of that is true, but just make sure that you're not going all the way into the dark in the flesh. Make sure that you're having the conversation with all of the doubts and fears and screaming and whatever with the Lord. Guard that connection that you have, because it is a sacred conversation, and he never leaves you. Yes, he understands your deepest, darkest feelings, but he never leaves you hopeless. So if there's only hopelessness and only dead ends that you're not seeing with the eyes of God. You're not seeing clearly with his perspective. So he's not asking for like this optimistic Pollyanna, everything is whitewashed view, but he is asking, he doesn't leave us in hopelessness, and he's asking for us to trust him, which doesn't deny our feelings, but just says, I'm going to have the conversation with God instead of allowing myself to fall off the edge of hopelessness. All we have to do is cry out. So don't quit. Don't give up on those dreams. They are very, very precious to God, and you don't need to know the outcome. All you need to know is that God remains good, and he is the only one that can redeem those kinds of dreams, no matter what happens to them.